You get a double dose of me today. How lucky are you? So in the short time that I had to prep for this, I decided, and Isaac had said, "Hey, whatever you're going to teach, that one's easy. You can just do what you're going to do." Well, the fact is that you guys have been in a class. He's done a class on Hebrews, and I just didn't think it was fair to give you a double dose of something you've had. And so I wanted to actually do for you what I initially came here to do, which was to give a scientist perspective and maybe arguments for the existence of God, because that's something I really enjoy to do. And in my line of work, I am a scientist by trade. I use science in nearly everything that I do day in, day out. And so through my entire life, I have enjoyed the sciences and enjoyed what they're able to teach me and explain to me. Now, why that's relevant is in today's society, and kind of really one of the underlying lessons from the sermon and reasons for the sermon is that today there isn't just a body of people who aren't submitting to God. They don't even recognize only his authority, but his existence. How do you have discussions with people when they don't even adhere to the authority that you're claiming is real, right? How do you have those discussions? How do you bring somebody in that doesn't believe in this? So today, what I wanted to do is introduce to you the strongest arguments that I've come across. Not that we're going to be able to get too deep in any one of them, but I wanted to give you 3 of the strongest arguments for the existence of God that I've come across, so that when you have discussions with others, that if you come across someone who's either struggling with this idea or is beyond not even struggling, just absolutely emphatic about God not being in existence, then you have a way to talk to them, hopefully have a productive conversation. And so we're going to see some big words. Don't worry about them. It is all, oh my word. Big words. Ooh, my bad, guys. Well, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to have to look back at this because that's even smaller up there for me. What was I thinking? Rookie up here. I'm telling you, man. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today are 3 philosophical arguments for the existence of God. The first 2 are really rooted in science, but the third is fully philosophical, but very powerful. Okay. So the first that we're going to get into, and again, this is for you to be able to have a ready defense. And so, a part of that ready defense is having an explanation. Obviously, when we read Romans chapter 1, verse 20, that we are without excuse. Why? Because he has made himself known through his power and his creation. So the 3 arguments that we're going to cover today, that you will just have to take my word for, because you can't read that little small print. The first would be cosmological argument, the teleological argument second, and then third, the moral argument. So starting off with the cosmological argument. Has anybody heard of the cosmological argument? Outside of the people in my class? Anybody? No? Kind of, sort of? What do you think it has to do with, if you had to take a wild guess? Yes, absolutely. Yes, yep. See, y'all are on it. Absolutely. It has to do with the cosmos or the universe. Cosmos meaning universe, and logical meaning the study. It's the study of the universe. And this is really where the crux of the issue comes, right? It's that, where do we come from? It really raises the question, what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? We all know the answer to that question. Which one came first? Chicken. Yeah, see? Man, y'all sure you've not studied this? No. But yeah, the chicken necessarily has to come first. Why? God created the chicken first, right? That is the sufficient cause for the egg. Now, the argument flows as follows, okay? Everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore, the universe has a cause. Now, that's a very simple argument. It's a very simple statement. It's like, okay, what do I do with that? There's a lot of implications to this. because for a long time, atheists and skeptics alike, which I don't really like using that term skeptic. I'm a skeptical person. I'm sure a lot of you are skeptical people, but obviously you're believers. You can be a skeptic and be a Christian, right? That's why we're having this discussion right now. It leads you to study. But anyways, that's a tangent. Why is this argument something you need to know? Because early on, atheists and skeptics, so to speak, agnostics would say that the universe has always been, it hasn't had a cause, right? And necessarily that's what you would have to believe to have an answer outside of a creator making the universe. So, oh man, what was I thinking? I am so sorry, guys. Now, this argument is based on the law of causality. Does anybody know about the law of causality? I'm not worried about you reading off the screen because that ain't happening. Anybody have the law of causality? Causality. Cause and effect. Yes, right? For every effect must have a cause. There's actually a two-part law there, is that every effect has a cause, and the cause must be greater than that effect. Okay? So atheists got skirted around this because what was the cause? Well, the universe, it's always existed, right? Well, you know who said no to that? Well, Christians, obviously, but other scientists started to come along and say, well, that's actually not the case. Atheistic, agnostic, evolutionary scientists have come out and said, well, maybe we don't have an eternal universe. Stephen Hawking, a brilliant mind, had said this: almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang. And Alexander Vilenkin, who's a professor of evolutionary science and director of the Institute of Cosmology at Tufts University, says this. He's an agnostic. He says, and he says this a little more strongly than Stephen Hawking, with the proof now in place, cosmologists, people that, this is not people that, make you pretty. These are people that study the cosmos, can no longer hide behind the possibility of a past eternal universe. There is now no escape. They have to face the problem of a cosmic beginning. Well, what's the problem? Why is this a problem? If science is just a mode by which we study an observation and it leads us to a conclusion, why is it a problem? Because it flips on its head the very thing that they believe in, that there is a natural explanation for why we're here. That's the problem. Is that all of a sudden if something had a beginning, there was a beginner, right? It can't just come out of existence because that violates the law of causality. So right now, because of the Big Bang, and there's actually quite a bit of science that goes behind this, and I don't have enough time to go into all of it, but one portion of that is actually given to us by Albert Einstein in his theory of general relativity. In this, he discovered that time, space, and matter all had to come into existence simultaneously, and they're interdependent upon one another. You know what he did with this information? He read it, and he studied it, and he figured out he didn't like it because of the problem that Alexander Vilenkin had already pointed out. So what did he do? He introduced the cosmological constant. Any math people in here? Any teachers? You know what the cosmological constant was? Dividing by zero. Now, some of you that are teachers, they're like, no, you never divide by zero. That's not what you do. He put a fudge factor, as Frank Turk would say, in his equation to make it say something to support this idea of an eternal universe because of the implications that it had a beginning. There was a finite time ago that all of space, time, and matter came into existence. That is significant. And one of the most brilliant minds that we know saw this and didn't like it because he's an atheist. Now, it wasn't until Edwin Hubble got him to come out, look through his telescope, and see the expansion of the universe, meaning that if it's expanding, it's come from a single point. He said this: the cosmological constant was the biggest blunder of my professional career, and now I am seeking the mind of God. It's a quote from Albert Einstein. Now, to our knowledge, he never became a Christian, but he switched his idea of there not being a God to now trying to find the mind of God because of science. Don't ever let anybody tell you that science has disproven God already, that he's an afterthought, he's a myth to be put in the books with the rest of them. Because the fact of the matter is that now science, if we look at it, it's pointing towards a start. There must be a first uncaused cause. Now you're just saying, man, you're just saying cause a lot, right? I mean, this stuff can get pretty repetitive, and it's like, I'm kind of getting messed up here. But think about what that means. There must be an uncaused, eternal first cause that causes everything else. And if the universe isn't that, if there is a beginning that now all science, and again, the leading atheists and agnostics of today have said, everybody now believes that there was a beginning. Well, there's got to be a cause outside of that, right? Has to be. So now you're faced with this decision. What do you believe? What's a better logical explanation for the beginning of the universe, that there is a cause? Now, again, this points back to the law of causality. The second point of it is what? That the cause has to be greater than the effect. If space, time, and matter came into existence all at the same time, what does that mean? That the cause has to be spaceless, timeless, and immaterial. And on top of that, it has to be immensely powerful, has to have the free will, a personal agent have the free will to make the decision to cause, and ultimately intelligent. What does that describe? God, right? What we would call God. And scientists are still struggling with it. Well, we just not really come up with, how this has happened. Or they submit to the fact that it's come from nothing. Me personally, I like the idea of an uncaused causer that's intelligent, that's outside of nature. If nature began to exist, in which it did, its cause must be supernatural. And this is God, right? So the more that you dive into this argument, the more that you start to see there's some validity in it. And now, I actually, not that you can see it yet again, but I've actually, for each argument, I'm going to give you counter arguments, because I don't think it's fair that I tell you this and not set you up for the counter argument somebody's going to ask you, right? That wouldn't be fair. So let me see here. There we go. Now, some of the counter arguments to this argument are as follows. Well, if everything is subject to the law of causality and must have a beginning, what is God's cause? What caused God? Oh, well, that kind of defeats the purpose, right? Well, then whatever caused God, what caused it? And it goes back and back and back, and it actually creates what is called an infinite regression, which is a philosophical or logical fallacy. Well, can't beat that. No, we've already established this. There must be an uncaused first cause. What does that mean? That it is eternal. It doesn't need a cause. It is, its being, its existence is necessary. It's not subject to the law of causality that it has to have a cause. It is the necessary cause, and all effects and causes afterwards are contingent upon it. That's the answer to that. And if you watch any Christian versus atheist debate, they will bring that up every single time, and it's already been answered that God isn't subject to being caused because he is. His being is and always will be. Okay, so that's the answer to that counter argument. The multiverse theory. Has anybody ever heard of the multiverse theory? So Alexander Vilenkin, the person I just had mentioned earlier that quoted, he went to Stephen Hawking's 70th birthday and gave a paper. What a birthday present, right? But he talked about the multiverse theory and talking about basically that there's an infinite number of universes outside of our own, and that The reason why we find ourselves in that Goldilocks universe is because all of the other universes statistically have taken away the very, very fine tuning, and which we're getting to. It's taken away all of those really unlikely scenarios and allowed us to be. Because if there's an infinite number of universes, then by definition, this has to exist. Now, he does go on to admit at the end of it that it says it still doesn't answer the question, where does it come from? And there's a galaxy generator or a universe generator. What's this generator? Is it outside of time? Is it immaterial? Is it spaceless? Is it timeless? Well, then you're starting to describe God again. You're just convoluting the answer. So I bring all this up to tell you this is what you can expect if you have a discussion with someone who doesn't believe that God is the answer for life and why the universe is, and that you can answer some of these questions in a logical manner. Now, the last counter argument that I want to bring up is that this argument doesn't prove the existence of our God. It doesn't prove that the God of the Bible is the first uncaused cause, okay? It could be the flying spaghetti monster for all we know. And that they say that. Literally, that's kind of the word. That's the little jab they get in. And that's true. This argument does not prove the existence of our God, but it's a start. There has to be a first cause. And then there are other arguments we can get into with the Bible. Let's say the scientific foreknowledge, messianic prophecies, the miracles, the resurrection of Jesus, that proves that God of the Bible to be that first cause. You got to start somewhere. You got to start that conversation and say, okay, if a supernatural being is the cause of the universe, then we can have the discussion that gets you to the point of the God of the Bible. But it's true. And both of these other arguments, that's a counter argument as well. It doesn't prove the God of the Bible, but you're not trying to prove the God of the Bible because they don't even believe in the Bible yet. That's where you get to after this, right? Now, before I move on, is there any comments or questions on this argument? Yes. Well, right now in the scientific community, the Big Bang theory is the prevailing theory. And with the Big Bang, obviously that bang came from somewhere, but it came from nothing. Right now, they don't have an answer for where everything came into existence. Space, time, and matter are all correlative based on the theory of general relativity that Albert Einstein came up with. And their existence came into being together. From where? What was that cause? So what was your... Well, yes, the Big Bang, but see, that's not the cause, it's an effect. That's the big thing, is that what caused the Big Bang. Now, Frank Turek, who's an apologist, and if you go and look him up, he does a great job. He goes and talks to a lot of different churches, and I'm not saying that he's always sound in doctrine, but he's a doctor and does a fantastic job describing these scientific arguments. And he's saying, do you believe in the Big Bang? And he'll say, Frank, we're in church. We don't believe in the Big Bang. Right? And he says, well, I believe in the Big Bang. I just know who banged it. All right? And the fact of the matter is we don't know how God threw the stars out into existence. Right? And that there is movement, there is expansion, that is measurable, that is happening. But that's not because at a finite time ago, some 13.5 billion years ago, that a period, a dot the size of a period on the page, exploded into existence with all of the matter that we see now, and space and time come into existence. It takes more faith to believe that than an eternal, spaceless, timeless, immaterial, intelligent being creating this. Because when you really boil it down to, you've got to either believe that something came from nothing or an eternal being created the something. So the Big Bang Theory is a theory, absolutely. And really, when you boil all these arguments down, it's not a proof that God exists, it's evidence that God exists. And there's a reason for that, okay? Because, and this is really diving into it, but I'm going to tell you now, why would God not give 100% hard fact proof for his existence? If he wanted people to know that he existed, why doesn't he just prove it? That's exactly right. He wants you to have faith. Can you have faith in something that you know exists, that has made its presence known to you? Absolutely not. The fact is that it is impossible to please him without faith. That's been said in Hebrews, the book of Hebrews, right? That this system is set up to where if we have faith in him, a being outside of what we can experience physically with all five senses, and we still believe in him, how pleasing is that to him? That's, yeah. Well, sure, absolutely. Yes, I mean, we have great evidence. We have absolutely great evidence. I like to think of it as a jury, right? That we're part of the jury and people are bringing evidence to plead the case. We weren't there at the beginning when God created everything, but he makes a really strong case, right? We have to, by faith, look at this evidence and make that decision for ourselves, right? That we weren't there, but we have really good evidence to believe that this is the explanation. And that's really the point. That right now, science claims to have the answer, but really starts pointing back to what we've already believed. Yes. So, so when you're talking about dating things, and we're talking about radiometric dating or radioactive dating, what they're using, and I honestly don't have time to go into the depth of the science on that. I do have a class on that talking about that dating system, but really what it boils down to is this: is that first and foremost, a worldwide flood, we believe a worldwide flood happened, correct? It wiped over the entire face of the earth, okay? And redistributed a lot of dirt and a lot of sediment and a lot of rock. Every one of these radioactive daughter elements that they're dating, so really what's happening is that there's an element that as it degrades, it turns into another element. And it has a half-life. And that half-life is actually, the math on that's pretty sound. But what they'll do is they'll take a sample of soil and say, okay, well, there's this much parent element and there's this much daughter element. So we can conclude, because of the half-life, how long it takes for this element to degrade. Well, if we've got this much daughter element, it has to have been this long for this parent element to degrade into this many daughter elements. That's really the down and dirty explanation of that. But when you get a redistribution of all of these elements, especially on the top portion of the earth, and these elements are water soluble, yeah, it's starting to look pretty bad as far as your data. The fact of the matter is that it's still not a proven fact through these radiometric dating, like carbon dating. And that's really only accurate out to so many thousand years. So what you're saying is right. Now, I would have to take a whole entire class to really get into the depth of it. But you're right. And it can be confusing because there is a lot of sound math out there. I mean, we have some amazing pieces of technology based ultimately in math. And so what do we believe? You know, the same people that are giving us all this technology is telling us, hey, that God you believe in, we've also proved that that's not the case. If you look in the science textbooks, it is really taught as fact. That's really, I mean, it's stated as a theory, but it's really the tone of it is more fact. Well, and when you go to college, I mean, the prevailing, I took a lot of biology classes. I actually went to Freed-Hardeman. So, I had a Christian education there, but I'll be honest with you, it was still difficult because the material that we used was so rooted in evolution and was mixed with theory and fact that it's hard to really separate some of it until you've done enough study. And that's really, one of the things that like science really need to do on behalf of Christians, that we don't get swindled. We don't get put in this category of you're just an unintelligent, myth-believing person that just has this coping mechanism that you developed through evolution, and you don't want to let go of it. You just don't want to recognize the truth that you don't have a purpose, that ultimately you don't have a place to go at the end.
But which is more reasonable, to believe that there is a source of knowledge and power, or that it happens spontaneously?
That's exactly the point. And that's really the point of these arguments right here. It's that which is more logical, which is more reasonable to believe. That if you're being intellectually honest, it is more reasonable to believe that this, as you said, intelligence, what we have, which actually is expressed in our genome, where did that come from? There's a lot of information stored in your 3.5 trillion letter long DNA code, all in the right order. It has to be in the right order to make you, you. And that when your mom and your dad had combined their genetic material, they made a brand new genetic being, a brand new genetic code. How does that happen out of random processes? And that's really a good segue into the teleological argument, which is the next argument. So the teleological argument is stated basically as follows. It's the design argument, or the fine-tuning of the universe. There's honestly so much that we could go into. There's really not enough time to go into every single fine-tuned aspect of the universe, but I definitely want to give you a decent amount because it kind of makes you understand just how unlikely and really impossible it is for life to be how it is right now and exist the way that it does. So, Stephen Hawking said this. Again, he had just passed away not too long ago. Everybody kind of knows who Stephen Hawking is, right? Brilliant mind. But Stephen Hawking stated this: if the expansion rate, meaning the rate at which this known universe is kind of going out from each other, if the expansion rate 1 second after the Big Bang had been smaller by even 1 part in 100,000 million, it would have collapsed back on itself before it reached present size. On the other hand, if it had been greater by a part in 1 million, the universe would have expanded too rapidly to form stars, planets, and ultimately life. Now, obviously, he's operating on the idea that the Big Bang Theory, that everything had come from a single point. But the point of the matter is that this expansion rate, had it been faster or slower, we could not exist right now. We wouldn't be here. And again, that number, the 100,000 million, that's his quote. I can't even begin to tell you how small that is. Okay, but it still has a chance. So we move on to the next one. Number 2, if the gravitational force was altered by 1 part in 10 to the 40th power, stars would not exist, and therefore we would not exist either. That gravitational force that pulls in when a body with mass spins, right? There's movement, it pulls in. That's how really the solar system operates, that the sun itself has a lot of mass, and it's keeping us in orbit around it. If that force was off by 1 part in 10 to the 40th power, we'd be too close to the sun or would be too far away from the sun, and life would not exist as we know it. How do we get here from an explosion of random processes to get us here to be that fine-tuned in order for just life to begin? Well, there's a chance. Okay, so we go to the next one. And I've got some written notes right here. Now, this next little piece, bear with me. This is going to be a lot of information, but I think that it'll be beneficial to you. Okay, so water. First and foremost, water is an amazing molecule. Okay, and I want to talk to you about this before we even go into the rest of the planetary stuff. If water didn't behave the way that it does, life couldn't exist the way that it does here on the Earth. You know, it's interesting, and I don't know if many of you know why this occurs, but it's the only molecule that behaves the way that it does. Okay, that when elements and molecules are exposed to certain temperature and pressure changes, their state changes. We know this. Water evaporates when it gets hot. It's liquid when it's at a certain temperature range and pressure range, and then it solidifies when it gets cold enough. Everybody knows this. This is first grade, right? Now, here's the key, though, is that everything when it gets colder condenses, except water to a certain extent. Degrees or 4 degrees Celsius, it is the most dense that it's going to be. You're tracking with me. You're tracking with me. I appreciate that. He's exactly right. The fact is that water, after a certain temperature, will actually expand. What happens is that molecule, you've got an oxygen molecule and you've got 2 hydrogens. And as you decrease the temperature, those hydrogens get closer and closer and closer. It compacts together. And then, because that's what happens, molecules get more dense. But what water does that no other element does, those 2 hydrogens start acting like the same ends of a magnet. They start to repel each other, and they go super far away from each other. That's why your pipes freeze, and that's why ice floats. Have you ever thought about that? If things are supposed to get more dense as they get colder, well, ice is colder than cold water, right? No. It would sink wherever it's freezing, right? Yeah. Life in water could not exist where freezing temperatures occur. It would freeze from the bottom up. But no, because solid state of water is actually less dense than liquid cold water, it floats to the top and allows life to exist. Why does that happen only with water? Seems to me it's designed. It points towards design. Well, it had a chance. Okay, so we move on. And molecules that do behave that way, Yeah, it almost seems, counter to what natural law would dictate in the realm of chemistry. You said. Absolutely. Yeah, water's the most important molecule for us when it comes to sustaining life, and that's really about where we're going to with this. So, first, living things need water to occur naturally in liquid form, right? So this means that a planet has to be close enough to the sun in order for the warmth to keep it in liquid state, but not too far away, or not too close that it evaporates, or too far away so that it is freezing. Now, if the Earth were 5% closer to the sun, all water would turn into gas, creating a massive greenhouse effect and burn up all life. Well, that sounds great. But if it were 20% further away from the sun, all water would become ice, carbon dioxide clouds would form, and not enough sunlight would reach the land. Life would be kind of not possible in that scenario as well. Now, here's the other situation we're running into. The sun, that star that we were talking about, it has to be the right size. If it's too big, the gravitational force is going to be too strong and it's going to pull us in too close. And we're going to be about like Mercury or Venus, and we're going to be on fire, basically. But if it's too small, the gravitational force would not pull it in, or if it did, we'd be too close again, and we're in the same boat. The sun is the exact right size to keep us where we are to allow life to exist. We're in this Goldilocks position, but that's a poor descriptor of what really we are. We are so fine-tuned in our positioning just in the solar system alone to have life exist. So many very unlikely things, really statistically impossible things have to occur for life to exist. Now,
Somebody wants you to think that happened spontaneously.
and not only that, from an explosion. How does that happen? Does order come from disorder?
All this boils down to is that God is a great designer and we are designers.
Absolutely, 100%. And that is more reasonable, as you said, to believe than to believe that so long ago, an explosion from nothing created all of this in this very fine-tuned state. Now, I will say one more thing. Did you not know that our great protector is Jupiter? Have you ever thanked God for Jupiter? You should. Because that gas giant actually catches nearly all of the meteorites that would be heading towards us. Those big purple marks on Jupiter, those are impacts from meteors that's bigger than the Earth itself. Now, I don't feel too good about our chances if one of those meteors hits us. But no, actually Jupiter, because of their gravitational pull and the positioning where they are, they actually shield us from all of that cosmic debris called meteors. How wonderful is that? Thank God for Jupiter, right? Yeah, absolutely. But
Because of its mass, and it pulls.
yes, its mass has a gravitational pull that pulls those meteorites towards it instead of us.
Not because it's out there guarding it, because of the
Well, it's scientific, absolutely, yeah, but a designed science, in my opinion, right? And the other thing is if we didn't have a moon the right size at the right distance away, then our water cycle wouldn't work the way that it does. Tides wouldn't be what they need to be, and again, effectively, our water cycle, which again, as was stated earlier, is pretty much the most important molecule that we have. If the water cycle didn't exist the way that it does now, we'd be in trouble. So these are just things that I wanted to bring up to you, and there are many, many more that point towards there being an intelligent design to put us in this very fine-tuned position in order for life to exist. It would be so less logical to believe that out of a random event with no intelligent design, with no intent behind it, for all of this fine-tuning to occur. And this is beyond really talking about us as human beings and all of the complex life we see on Earth and the interdependency of these relationships. You know, I mean, when you think about it, if evolution is true, you still got the law of biogenesis. Oh, I'm still on this. The law of biogenesis states what? Life must come from pre-existing life. Science hasn't really answered that yet. And my guess is they're not going to. Well, no. Well, they keep trying to clone, right? But no, the fact of the matter is that this law, which is beyond a theory, it's a proven fact at this point, is regarded as fact that life must come from pre-existing life. Well, evolution is already in direct opposition to that. It's saying, well, life at some point did come from non-life, just did, and from the top of the least complex has evolved into the most complex. Well, what do we see with the second law of thermodynamics? Everything is in constant degrade. It's going downhill. When we look at this in totality with each other, it really points towards a God being the reason we're here in our current state with the current complexity that we see. Man, we're not even going to get to my last argument. Well, I guess we got 3 minutes. Okay, I'm going to move on to that really quickly. I just want to introduce it to you. You guys have been great today in class, but it's the moral argument. Okay, and basically this is a discussion about, is there something objectively right or objectively wrong? When you talk with somebody about this, is going to be more of an emotional trigger. It's not really scientific in its study, but you ask somebody, is there anything that you could consider that's wrong, period? Anybody have anything that they know that if they talk to somebody they know is an atheist, say, hey, is there anything that you think is wrong across the board? They would say that just is what it is. I've had somebody to say, it's like, well, it just is what it is. You know, very cold to that aspect. Yeah, okay. I see where you're going with that. Okay. Now, and I want to get there because that is actually a counter argument that's pushed against the moral argument. Really, it actually proves the existence of God, but we'll get to that point. So if there is something really evil, because really good is subjective for a lot of folks, right? What my good is isn't your good. Okay. I think chocolate ice cream is amazing. You may think strawberries where it's at. It's subjective. Me, the subject, you, the subject, determines what the object is. But if something is objectively good or if something is objectively evil, it doesn't matter what the subject, me and you, think about it. It means that it is what it is. Is there something objectively evil? Is that the first bell? Okay. All right. We got a little bit of time. What about the torturing and sexual abuse of babies for fun? I think we could all agree that that is evil across the board. A lot of times what will happen is said, okay, all right, well then I'll grant you that. I'll grant you that evil exists. Why then does a all good God that cannot be in the presence of sin, that has the power to create everything, created you and created this world that has so much evil in it? Answer me that, Christian. How does a God that's supposed to be all good and can't be in the presence of the sin create a world with so much sin in it? Sorry, go ahead.
We're supposed to choose him.
Right, but he's the one that created you and created evil.
But if he wants you to serve him, that has to be your choice, and your choice to be servants of him or not, to be good or to be evil. And in order to be good, there has to be a counterbalance to it.
So did he create evil? So then why does evil exist? Why? He created man, right? He created the devil, didn't he? So then he created evil.
Where man could have a choice.
There you go. Let me ask it in this question. Is eating fruit inherently wrong? Not unless God says so. What happened in the Garden of Eden? He gave man a choice. He did not create evil. He created a system where free will exists, and that's where you were going. I know it, and that's where you were going as well, is that he created us good, innocent, but gave man the free will. He definitely created the ability for evil to exist, but he did not create evil himself. That was man. The fall came from man's decision to do the opposite of God's will, which was, don't eat this piece of fruit. Man, how simple life was in the garden. Right? One rule. Come on, Adam. Come on, Eve. Right? But that's that counter. Go ahead. Well, I'll be honest with you. I'm not rightly equipped to get down into that, and it's 11:31. But that is a discussion we can have. And I don't even know if we know what existed and what was created in his realm outside of the earth and at the time of our creation. I don't know if that's something that, at least for me right now in my current stage of study, I could get back with you on that, though. I will not be with you tonight. You'll have... Right? It's interesting stuff, is it not? I mean, and it really can, when you get down into it. If I play devil's advocate, I can put you some very uncomfortable situations. But there is an answer. And that's the point. And that if we do study this, you can have some really productive conversations with people and prove that Christians are not only intelligent, not just hide your head under a rock or the Bible, but we believe but for good reason. We have good reason to believe this. You've been fantastic. Oh, one more. Hey, well, there you go. That's a productive conversation right there. Man, all right. Charles the apologist over here. Well, thank you guys so much for your attention. I won't hold you up anymore. We'll end with a prayer. Dear Lord, we thank you so much for this day. We thank you for all the many blessings of it. We thank you for this time together. We are truly blessed. Lord, help us to recognize the blessings we have in our lives. Help us to be good stewards of those blessings. Lord, help us to go out this week, be shining lights for you, and looking for opportunity to spread your word and your will to others. Help us to have a ready defense, be able to have good, honest, and compassionate conversations in order that we might show you to others. Lord, we know that there are many that have different ailments, whether that be physical, emotional, or spiritual. Lord, I pray that you be with each and every one of those. And again, I pray that you be with us as we go out this week. Keep us safe and guide, guard, and direct us. Lord, we thank you again, most of all, for your Son, the amazing sacrifice he gave for us, that we may have eternal life with you. We ask this all in his most wonderful and matchless name. Amen.